All right, so Kant says we need to rely on our capacity for abstract reasoning to identify what actions are morally permissible, what actions are morally obligatory, and what actions are morally prohibited. And Kant wants us to rely on this capacity for abstract reasoning exclusively. He does not want us giving one iota of consideration to the actual real world consequences of what we do. Instead, what Kant wants us to rely purely on our capacity for rationality, for logic, for abstract reasoning. So how exactly do we do that? Well, Kant's going to say the first thing you have to understand is what an imperative is. Okay? An imperative is an action that is required of you. It's something you have to do. And there's different kinds of imperatives. One kind of imperative is called the hypothetical or practical imperative. And these are the actions that are required of you when you find yourself in a particular set of circumstances, or you find yourself in a particular situation, or you're operating under particular conditions. Okay? And you want to achieve some sort of outcome, or you want something to occur. The action that you have to take to get that outcome under these circumstances is the hypothetical imperative. So, for example, if I really want to post an image of myself to Snapchat, which you know I want to do, there's certain things I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to take the selfie, right? And then I'm going to have to open up my Snapchat app, and then I'm going to have to hit whatever icons are required for me to boost that selfie up onto the Snapchat platform. So those are the actions, those are the imperatives that I have to do when I find myself in the circumstances of wanting to post a selfie to Snapchat. But if I don't want to post that selfie, then I don't have to do any of those things, okay? Similarly, what if the situation I find myself in is that I'm looking at an image of my friend that he or she has posted onto Snapchat, and I'm thinking like, wow, that is not a good look. And I really want to let them know, you might think about taking that selfie you posted to Snapchat down. What do I have to do? Well, I'm going to have to text, I'm going to have to phone, I'm going to have to track this person down in person, I'm going to have to figure out a way to deliver the message effectively so that the person hears it. On the other hand, if it's not the selfie that my friend has posted of him or herself, but instead an image of me that I don't like, that they've posted onto Snapchat, and I want to let them know, like, hey, I'm not digging this picture you posted of me. Again, I'm going to have to figure out what I have to do in order to achieve this outcome. I'm going to have to track them down, text them, and phone them, and so forth. Okay? So hypothetical imperatives are these actions that are required of us under certain circumstances, okay? Under certain conditions. And if we don't find ourselves in those conditions of wanting to post a selfie or wanting to notify a friend of something, then those actions aren't required. They're required only under certain conditions. And Kant was not particularly concerned with hypothetical imperatives. Instead, Kant was concerned with what's called the categorical imperative. These are the actions that are always required of us, or the actions that are never ever morally permissible. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are that we find ourselves in. If we identify a categorical imperative that relates to an action we always have to do, there are no exceptions whatsoever. It doesn't matter what happens as a result of this action. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are that we find ourselves in. The action applies the requirement applies categorically to these kinds of actions. So in other words, for Kant, the categorical imperative are these actions that are unconditional. It doesn't matter what circumstances you find yourself in. If you have identified a categorical imperative that indicates what you should always do, there are no exceptions to that. You always do it regardless of the situation and regardless of the outcome. The categorical imperatives is universal. In other words, these are things that everyone should always do or never do. And the categorical imperative is universalizable. Okay. Now this is a really key concept. So maybe make a note of yourself. Make a note to yourself of this. The categorical imperative is universalizable. And what Kant means by that is this. Well, this is what he says. Act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become universal law. Okay. So we're going to dig into this a little bit here in the next lecture. But what Kant's saying here is, the way you're going to use your capacity for rationality to determine what actions are morally prohibited or morally required is you're going to imagine everybody always doing what you're contemplating doing. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use your capacity for abstract reasoning to determine whether or not a world where everybody is doing what you're contemplating doing would be a world that makes rational, logical sense. Okay? So what Kant is saying is that when you decide that a particular action is morally prohibited or morally obligatory, you making that decision is implying a rule for everyone. Now, what Kant is not saying is that you should enforce these rules on others. Kant's not saying that, because for Kant, us being free agents is very important. But what Kant is saying is that if you determine that a particular action is rationally, logically required or prohibited, then everybody who is gifted with the same capacity for abstract reasoning as you would come to the same conclusion, that this action is morally permissible or morally obligatory. Okay, so in the next lecture, what we're going to look at is, what does that actually look like in practice? How can we find actions that are universalizable, actions that everybody could always do or nobody could ever do?